Ezra Chiloba, CEO of IEBC, and there was a press briefing that was being done by the Elections Observers Group in regards to the diaspora vote, and that is something that Ezra is currently speaking on. So let's just cross over there and listen in.
As personal voting. Personal voting basically means you must show up in person and cast your ballot. So far, the Commission has been able to develop a policy on voter registration and voting for the Kenyan diaspora. And the idea is to enhance the implementation of the law on progressive registration and voting for the Kenyan diaspora. It provides guidelines on voter eligibility, methodology of voter registration, recruitment and training of voter registration officials, registration vote venues, as well as the role of other stakeholders. And this was done on November 20th, 2015. So if you want to familiarize yourself with the policy, it's on our website. Please visit and give us comments as Shem does every other time. And some of the key principles that we look at in this policy is the compliance aspect with the legal framework, the Kenyan legal framework. We cannot invent procedures or processes other than following what the law of Kenya expects of us. Then, of course, the authority of the Commission to be able to promulgate rules around diaspora or develop rules around election, which includes diaspora voting. Then considerations were made with the Kenya's diaspora policy, to what extent is enabling other entities in government or in government to work or provide services to Kenyans living abroad. Then compliance with the laws of the host country. You do not want to go into an arrangement that is likely to violate the laws of the host countries. So we also have to pay consideration to that. Then, of course, the independence of the Commission and its core values. We must always remember that at the end of the day, the Commission has been given the constitutional powers to be able to regulate or execute this particular mandate. So that independence should allow us to make certain decisions with respect to the future of diaspora participation in the electoral process. And some of the quick highlights I can make before I come to a close, with respect to the baseline data, our policy now is to collaborate with all entities that could be having data on the diaspora so that we can use that data for purposes of informing our decisions. So we work closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Also, recently, we have engaged with the IOM, International Office of Migration. And of course, we've had a discussion with Dr. Shem and his group in terms of how we validate, authenticate the data that we have received so far. And then we also said, for us to be able to set up registration centers to facilitate voting, the Commission adopted a position that the host country must have at least 3,000 Kenyans formally registered with the Kenyan embassies or High Commission or consulates in those particular countries. 3,000, so that we see if it makes economic sense to be able to invest in the process. And when we looked at the data as late as September this year, we noticed that the information we got from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in Australia, for example, they tell us that we have about 27,000 Kenyans registered out of approximated population, Kenyan population of 30,000. In German, we have 7,000 registered against a projected population of 15,000. In the US, we have 25,000 registered against a projected population of 400,000. Then in London, 9,000 registered against a projected population of 200,000. So you can see the variation. If this data is reliable, then how do we make decisions based on this particular information? And why aren't these Kenyans registering with their own embassies? It's a conversation that is never ending when we meet the diaspora groups. They'll give us their own standards that qualifies them to participate in the electoral process, which standards are largely permissive. And for us, we say the Kenyan law is very strict in terms of who should be allowed to vote. Then, type of election, the Commission also made a decision that if we have to facilitate voting abroad, then we should limit that to the presidential election and referendum, not any other position. You'll ask me why? The reason is because of the logistic co-implication of having all seats, or voting for all seats. In Kenya, we have 6. So if you're going to Dallas, you set up a polling station, and you have 1,440 county assembly wards. It means you must provide a ballot, 1,450 ballot boxes in Dallas alone. And now multiply by the number of countries that you want to go. So we said perhaps we can afford one ballot box for presidential or referendum. But again, we say, since it's progressive, we'll see how to open up other seats as we go along. Methods of voting, as prescribed by the Kenyan law. This one we have, we've already said that voting, the law requires us to vote in person. Then voting period, as much as possible, we want to align with the Kenyan time as specified in law and at the respective gazetted polling stations. And during this process, the Commission is also open to the idea that agents and election observers may have access to polling stations. In terms of election officers or officials, the Commission should be able to recruit Kenyans living abroad to be able to manage the elections, and of course working also with the Kenyan officials who live abroad. Voter education programs, of course, we agree with also the recommendations that we see in the report. We need to find ways, innovative ways of engaging the diaspora population when it comes to voter education. We have a challenge there. Every time I go into this meeting, sometimes I see there's a bit of a difference of understanding in terms of really what is voting all about in Kenya. So we have to do a lot of stuff in terms of educating. Then host country issues, we must be practical enough and start negotiating with other governments so that they open up or they allow us to be able to carry out the exercise. And when it comes to negotiating with other governments, the leadership is with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So in as much as we may say we should not allow the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to have a free hand when it comes to election management, there are things we cannot do without them, especially dealing with foreign governments. So we must collaborate. So then, of course, the last one, in terms of the policy, we are talking about implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, and where we are saying that we'll, as much as possible, abide by the Supreme Court decision to report on what the Commission is doing to ensure that we make progress in as far as diaspora registration and voting is concerned. So as I come to the end, let me state that given some of the changes that we've seen in the recent past, in the law. The question of registration of voters and facilitating the diaspora to participate, the timelines are going to shift, obviously. We might come back to you much earlier than we had planned. Then there's a question about regulations on diaspora voting. We have regulations already, regulations 2012, but we've been advised to be able to review them. And when we appeared in Parliament a month ago, we were advised that we need to have a further conversation with Parliament in terms of how we want to structure the content of these regulations. So I might want to invite the different stakeholders to think about what are some of the new elements that we need to bring on board so that we have a more efficient system that facilitates diaspora voting. Then I think 1.5 months ago or 2 months ago, we launched thematic working groups on the different electoral processes. So in the same vein, we also established the thematic working group on diaspora voting. And this is a multi-stakeholder working group that brings together different actors or relevant actors. And I'm also glad that at least civil society groups are represented, including representatives of the diaspora. So the earlier you have this engagement now going forward, the better. And to close, I want to say that there are things we can do in the short term to ensure that this right is realized. There are things we leave for the medium term. Then there are things that we leave for the long term. And for the long term, in particular, there are proposals around the use of technology to facilitate diaspora participation in the electoral process. It's something to think about for the future. But with respect to 2017 general election, I can state that we're just going to be manual, the way we do it. What we did in 2012 in the East African region will still revert to the same. The only difference is that we'll register people using biometric kit. But when it comes to voting, it still be the normal process. I scanned through the report and I saw very important recommendations that we may need to consider going forward. So let us have this conversation going each and every day, knowing very well that for us as a commission, we deal with more practical issues. And we hope to be making progress even as we try to make things much better for the diaspora population. With those many remarks, I want to say thank you very much and congratulations for having given us this report. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was the CEO of IEBC giving us a speech on this particular specious occasion. I want to thank him and also Dr. Shem Choda for sharing their insights as far as the diaspora issue is concerned. I think now what we're going to do is that because of time, we're going to move straight to the launch of the report so that you can be able to also have your copies, because you'll be talking about a report that you don't have in your table. And you can be able to have that report and perhaps you can have an engagement later on. So I want to invite the CEO.
Right, now the Elections Observers Group, as you've seen, they're just about to launch survey findings on diaspora registration and voting. The CEO of IEBC, Ezra Chiloba, has just been addressing the media there and asking the diaspora to really support the IEBC and come out and register to vote, and indeed vote once the time comes in 2017, that they will, as a commission, make it very possible for people outside the country to be able to vote for the leaders that they want. So that is that survey, which is currently being launched by the Elections Observers Group in Lillian Towers. So let's just cross over there and continue listening in.
is going to cut the chairman as soon as that we done that, let's do the African theme of just celebrating the crafts.
Okay, again, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate ELOG for delving into this matter of diaspora participation in the electoral process, which has now been compiled in a book titled The Other Electorate, a comparative analysis on diaspora voter registration, voting, and advanced voting. So let me officially launch this book.
So this is an official copy handed over to the commission. They are very good recommendations that we definitely need to implement. Please discuss it internally and see how best we can be able to franchise people within the other electorate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
A round of applause, please.
So this as well is the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. The other electorate. I hope as well we will discuss it and see how best we can engage the commission. Thank you very much. Good start. Thank you.
Well, that brings the ceremony to that one end. We're going to have the copies distributed in the different chambers by my team so that everybody has a copy. What we're going to do now is that we're going to just have a very short session for feedback from the audience. And Regina was leaving. Yes, so I'll not be able to have doing this. So let me just do it on behalf of Regina. If there's some feedback that we can get very quickly from the plenary, after that, then we can have a vote of thanks.